expensive, but staying there room 13. Usually airy and usually very, and that's just how my life goes. And I don't ever try to dress to impress. Fuck you, preppy asshole. On the 14th floor where the bathroom door don't lock. So happy we don't gotta worry about the cops. We could all get arrested for this, but when the party is mixed, I don't give a shit tonight. Alright. Now she walks in the bedroom fast, despite all the noise from the crowd. Now she's Panthers on the bathroom sink. Her mother would be so proud. Gets on the deed and there's a line to go pee, but the bathroom looks like a war zone.
Welcome in to episode 113 of Fired Up. Check us out at firedupsports.com. Dom and Chris have the night off. They're doing some other things, some extracurriculars. We brought in the ringer. Mark Ramos joining us. Mark, what's going on, man?
Nothing much, dude. Just hanging in there, getting ready for this NHL Draft again.
Yes, we have big things planned for it. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but
Sure.
to start it off, at the top, it was, I know we teased it last week about the tailgate that we were having, and it was a lot of fun. You came out, a bunch of the Fired Up team came out, Drunk Phil's fans, caught a hot media. It was a good time. It was an eventful day. Phil's lost, but I enjoyed meeting everybody finally face to face.
It was great. It was great to get to put the faces to the names, and we were all kind of communicating through Slack and all these other forms of media, and it was nice to meet people in person.
Absolutely. Got my ass kicked in cornhole. That was fun. I think it was before you got there, though.
Yeah, I missed that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been getting my ass kicked.
So me and Dom took care of the Bell Smashers, Jen and Kylie, pretty easily. And then we got our ass kicked by the Drunk on Brawl guys, Rich and Don.
Oh, okay.
They took care of us, and that was about the extent of the cornhole. And then it stopped there. But yeah, listen, we got a lot of Flyers to talk about. It's going to be a Flyers-heavy, Flyers-only show probably. And listen, for the first time in like over a decade, the Flyers are like number one thing to talk about right now, which is weird because it's like for like a different reason. Like they're not good, obviously they're in the rebuild, but so much there's so much, I guess, noise is happening. And I guess kind of where we get started is when we were at the Phillies game. I feel like halfway through the game, we were checking our phones more than we were watching the game because these crazy rumors that came out about the Blues trade with the Flyers, and it kind of, I guess, it's on a hold right now. Will it happen? Will it not happen? What are your thoughts about this whole mess with the Flyers and Blues?
Yeah, it was. It would go down when we were at the Phillies game. I think we actually all said that. We were all kind of showing each other what we had seen, the tweets and things like that. Like, it's to be expected. I think at this point, you're going to have to take back, right? Like for contracts like the ones they're talking about, the Kevin Hayes contract, Travis Sanheim signed till the end of eternity. Ironically, like it's funny because there was the rumor about the Tony DeAngelo trade to Carolina. He would probably be the easiest one to move. I would imagine 1 year left at $5 million.
Easy to retain, yeah.
Yeah, easy to retain there. And that got shut down by the league apparently for being considered salary cap circumvention.
Yeah, I have a whole issue with that. Like, I get why the rule's in place.
Yeah.
But the salary cap doesn't really exist in the offseason. What are you circumventing if it doesn't exist?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I understand you don't want them to circumvent the cap in the middle of the season, but like the playoffs and the offseason, it doesn't really exist. I think you could go over the cap, 10% or whatever, but it doesn't really exist. So how are you circumventing something that doesn't really exist?
Yeah. It was odd. It's like one of those like small wrinkles in the CBA.
Yeah.
I think the NBA has something similar. Like I think where if you sign a guy, you can't, like in the summer, you can't move him until like at least December or something,
Yeah.
or whatever. But yeah, I think like with the St. Louis thing, there's a lot of moving parts there. Obviously, it isn't just on the Flyers side. The St. Louis Blues have a number of no trade clause, no movement clauses that they'd have to iron out, and that was kind of one of the snags that we had heard about was Torrey Krug, defenseman for the St. Louis Blues, is one of the players that I'm assuming was supposed to be coming back in this deal, but there was talk about him not willing to waive his no movement clause or no trade clause. I don't know which he has, but
I think
he
it's a no
wasn't
trade, I believe.
no trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and they have a number of guys on deals like that.
9.
9.
Because when it came out, they were like, "Oh, it could be being caught up by somebody who has a no trade clause," and then you immediately go to cap friendly. You pull up the list, and there's 9 players with no trades.
Yeah, and it was wild because I took a look at it. I thought it was 8,
Yeah.
and I'm looking at it, and then like no disrespect that we're not dogging Marco Scandella or anything like that, but I'm
Yeah.
like Marco Scandella has a modified no trade or something like that
Yep.
in his deal, and I'm like, that's pretty crazy that like players of
Yeah.
and it's funny because anytime like a team runs into this obstacle where they have to deal with like it becomes an obstacle with the no movement clause or the no trade clause, it's always funny that teams kind of, and the fan bases in particular, we get upset about it. We're like, oh, why doesn't he just waive? But like that player,
Yeah. No, I get it, but it's a weird thing because like if I'm Torrey Krug, yeah, I probably don't want to come to Philly. They're in the middle of a rebuild. I get it, but like the Blues also don't want me either.
Yeah.
So like I kind of would want to waive it. Like, all right, fine, you don't want me. All right, fine. I'm wanting somewhere else. Like it's a weird dynamic.
Yeah, and then I think on the flip side of that, right, is that you're owed 6.5 million. You've won a Stanley Cup before.
For another, what's his contract? Another 4 years? Is it?
I believe it's another 3 or 4.
3?
Yeah, it might be 3. And you've won before, and it's like you have a young family. Like I don't know if you want to uproot your life for that, and they got to pay you no matter what.
Right.
So it's like I'm not sure if that has like any like.
Where did he win? Was that with Boston or was he on the Blues team that won?
He was definitely on. I want to say he was on the. I don't think he was on the 2011 team.
So he signed the contract in 2020 with the Blues, so they already won. They won in what, 18 or 19?
19, I think.
Yeah, okay. So he was still in the Blues at that point. I'm trying to see if he won with the.
Did he win in St. Louis? I don't know if he was on that.
Nah, he went to the Blues in 2020.
Okay.
So he was with the Bruins from 2011-2012 season.
Okay.
So yeah, there's that.
Oh, so maybe he didn't. I thought maybe he was on. I mean, they didn't win in 2013, but they played the Hawks in that series. I thought maybe he was on one of those teams, but maybe not.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He's played in a lot of playoff games. That's
he's been
sure.
around,
Yeah,
and he's been on teams that have had success, and I can see why a player like that would be intriguing to the Flyers to bring back, even during a rebuild. But that's kind of hit a snag. Then it's been reported after that like maybe some iteration of that deal would be made without him, and I guess we'll have to wait and see. I don't know if the Flyers are still working on that or not, but
Right. Yeah, because I think originally there was a tweet that was put out. I forget who it was because there was a lot of reports over the weekend. But there was a report about like there was like 4 names involved, like Lawton, Sanheim.
Yeah.
It might have been D'Angelo and Hayes. I think might have been the 4.
Yeah.
And that's a massive, crazy trade if they're all in one trade and. Then obviously they got to bring money back. Krug, maybe a Scandella, I don't know. But now that Krug's not waiving his no move or no trade, it sounds like Hayes is going to be a St. Louis Blue at one point. Like it sounds like he's a goner to St. Louis. It's just now Sanheim might have to go somewhere else if they even end up trading Sanheim at all. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's been out there. I think with Sanheim that Winnipeg could be a landing spot. I believe he's like a Manitoba native, so Winnipeg's like close to home for him. And but I'm not really sure like where he kind of like the Flyers would have to probably take back another left shot defenseman in a deal like that. Uh, the I believe the Jets have like I think Brendan Dillon is out there. Um, Nate Schmidt is another player I think is out there. I think those guys are, they would probably have to go back in another deal if
Yeah.
like, and Winnipeg's going through like, they're another team that's kind of going through like a litany of changes
Yeah.
coming, for them. So it sounds like Blake Wheeler's moving on. There's, yeah,
Hellebuck's on the last year, his deal.
Hellebuck's on the last year of his deal.
Saw some Scheifele rumors earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, it looks like they're kind of at a point where they feel as though their group has gone as far as they could go, and that they're looking to make, some changes to I don't know if they're willing to take a step back or not. I think if you would add a player like Sanheim, you're still trying to compete, but maybe get a little bit younger there. Um, I'm not really sure from their perspective what it looks like, but uh, you know, that's also out there. So I mean,
Yep.
well, we'll have to wait and see how many of those come to fruition on draft night. But it definitely sounds like the Flyers are going to be busy.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Linus Allmark just won the Vesna Award. I don't know if that's any sort of surprise.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, he was fantastic this year.
He was in Boston this year.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember watching him a couple years ago in Buffalo and thinking
Buffalo,
he
yeah.
was good.
Yep.
That
Well, the
he had his
problem is
game.
it's Buffalo. Like,
Yeah, exactly. I think he probably had a great night against the Flyers too in a game that they
yeah.
probably lost,
Yeah,
and
probably. Yep.
and you know, but no, I mean that seems pretty spot on there. I'm not sure who else was a finalist for it, but
Who was a finalist? I think Hellebuck was one. I forget the third.
yeah,
Connor McDavid won the lead. Won the not the what did he win? The Ted Lindsay, which isn't
yeah,
really a surprise.
yeah,
And I imagine they didn't do the Hart yet, but that's going to be McDavid, probably
sure,
unanimous.
yeah. I would say so.
Um, but yeah, and then another kind of rumor that's come out really over the last handful of weeks is Scott Lawton.
Yeah.
Apparently, also with the St. Louis Blues, apparently they were interested, offered I guess a late first round pick, either what are they 25 or 28? I think is their picks in the
Yeah,
late first round.
they're definitely they got a couple late first. I
But
think it might be.
the rumor was that the Flyers turned down that one that was late first and a second round pick. If you
Yeah,
ask me, that's a lot for Scott Lawton. What do you think they should do with Scott Lawton here?
I agree with that. It's tough because you always have. I know I do. Like just describing to the fan part of me. Um, I like guys that want to be here and want to play
Yep.
for the team, and Scotty seems like he's the ultimate Flyer. He seems to love it here, and it's a shame when it gets to that point. But they clearly value what he brings to the table, both as a leader and his on ice production. But I think if you're getting another first rounder in this draft and you're already making a commitment to rebuild, it's hard to turn down a rumored price like that. The other thing is that they can revisit that deal obviously on draft day on draft night.
Yep.
Um, but you also risk, of course, the team that you're working with pivoting somewhere else and making a different move for maybe a cheaper return there. So you run that risk, but I'm not sure how like open the Flyers are to trading Lawton as much as they're checking like to see what the price is on him. But I mean that seems like a pretty good price. Like that seems like a pretty good
Yeah.
return to get for a player like that, even though we like him here. Um, and it's interesting because one of the players that gets tied to him often in terms of like some of the Flyers' best trade chips is Travis Konechny, and that's really kind of died down a lot of that talk. We haven't really heard much at all about rumored, trades involving Konechny. That doesn't mean anything won't happen, but it's just that that's kind of slowed down a bit as well.
Yeah, they've kind of been reluctant to trade Konechny. Like they've kind of said it early on, like we want to keep Konechny.
Yeah,
He's a good player. I know people criticize Torts. He's kind of one that's excelled under Torts. Like his
yeah,
game has gone to a whole nother level, which I didn't think was going to happen. Like if there was one player that I would think wouldn't have gotten along with Torts, I thought it was going to be Travis Konechny, but it was the total opposite.
yeah, yeah. It actually worked out pretty well. I don't think Konechny, even though he can be a little all over the place. I think even Tortorella has said this year there after a game where he was like, "This guy's nuts," like talking about Konechny, like him getting in, like going after like the biggest guy out there and mixing it up. He's kind of one of those players um, that a coach like John Tortorella, they just kind of fall in love with them. Like with their physicality and the way that they kind of approach the game, but. Konechny seems like one of those players to me as well that just seems to um, having a coach that's hard on him would bring out the best in him. He just seems like to be that kind of player, and um, and he had a great year this year, and
Yep.
they'll need more of that next year if they want to take any kind of step forward. They're going to need Travis Konechny to be as good as he was last year.
Yep. Do you think they would trade Kevin Hayes or Tony? I feel like we talked about it a little bit. I definitely think Kevin Hayes is going to St. Louis at one point, and Tony D'Angelo. Obviously we talked about the trade getting nixed by the NHL. I imagine that trade's going to be available come July 9th. Like I think they will make that trade at some point, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of a weird too. It's like Carolina's side of it is interesting because they went out last summer and got Brett Burns.
Yep. So where does Tony even fit? Like he's a
Yeah,
power play guy, but Burns was on that spot the entire year.
yeah, he's going to eat up a lot of
Yeah.
justifiably so. He's going to eat up a lot of those power play minutes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, from a structural standpoint, it makes sense because a team that plays as well as they do within a system like Carolina does, D'Angelo fitting in there like he did previously, um, that that the fit works already, but it's just a matter of like they're a little bit different looking now too on
Yeah.
the back end. So it's like he's not likely going to be deployed the same way because then it's like, what do you do? They could put him back again with Jacob Slavin, but then where does that mean like Burns has to play with Brett Pesci and what kind of fit is that? Are they a little too, is it a little too similar or whatever? You then have to figure that part out. And that seems like a lot for a team that's, in contention to go through to add one guy who's like, to be blunt about it, he's a power play specialist. He doesn't really
Yeah.
offer you much else.
No. No, it's Ghost if Ghost was like a little more physical and a little more of a wild card. Like that's what
Yeah.
Tony is.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the fact that, him and Tortorella seem to butt heads.
Yep.
He sits, the last week of the
We
season.
still have no idea why.
Yeah. And it was never like that. Nothing ever got leaked. There was never
No.
any kind of like explanation for that. He seemed annoyed about it, as
Yep.
I would imagine he would be. And I
Didn't
guess
agree with it at all. I think he basically said like I know or did he say I think he said I know I'm sitting. I just strongly disagree. I think it's dumb. Or
yeah,
something like
yeah,
that. Something along the
yeah.
lines
He
of
was
that.
pretty
Yeah.
blunt about it,
Yeah.
and justifiably so. I mean, I'd probably be upset if I were in that position, but um, it seemed like whatever it was seemed somewhat irreparable, like for them, like they couldn't move past it.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's a weird situation for him. Obviously, a hometown guy from the area, grew up, a Flyers fan. So I'm
Fan.
sure to have what seems like is a messy divorce, I'm sure doesn't sit right with him. I'm sure it's a
Right.
weird situation.
And he's bounced around to a ton of teams, whether it
Yep.
was, and he's still pretty young. I think he's 26 years old.
Tampa, Arizona, New York, Carolina, Philly. Am I missing
Yeah.
anybody?
Yeah. And
I
then
think that's it.
I think that's everybody. And
Yeah.
if he gets moved, he'll play somewhere else unless it's
Yeah.
back to Carolina. And
All right.
That seems like a lot of trouble to go through unless he ends up working with someone in a situation like where it's like that perfect storm, like it was in Carolina, where the fit worked and he got to play with a really excellent two-way guy in Slavin. But there's not too many Jacob Slavins around in the league, so
No, there's not. That was the issue here. They didn't have a
yeah,
Jacob Slavin to play with.
yeah.
Um, so I'm trying to think. So I guess a big rumor on top of rumor. One that's kind of slowed down, is the Carter Hart thing. I've said from day one I'd be really surprised if they trade Carter Hart. Um, but how do you think this goes? If do you think they trade him at all, or what's your thought?
I'm going back and forth about it,
Yeah,
in my own head, about this whole thing. Um, this this situation with the Hockey Canada,
yeah.
was it the 2018 group, whatever?
Sounds right. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean they're just deservedly so. They're treating it with like the utmost, um, just like the utmost seriousness, and
yeah.
um,
I think it's a little convenient. It hasn't been released yet, and I think they're gonna wait until like the dead summer of August. Like August is gonna happen, and it's just gonna get released on like a Friday.
yeah, and it's
Like,
it's kind of interesting because I know like last summer, late in the summer, like a player like Sam Steele, who I think ended up in Minnesota on a cheap 1-year deal, 24 years old. He was a part of that group, that team, that junior team, and I remember looking into, like, I'm like, it's odd to me that a 24-year-old, a guy that you would think would have a little bit more potential, that teams readily weren't kind of like lining up to get, try to bring this guy in. He ended up
right.
getting a short term deal, in Minnesota. And I remember I was talking to someone on Twitter at the time, and they had wondered, did that have anything to do with it, maybe? Um, and this whole Hockey Canada thing with the sexual assault case and stuff. And I mean, I wasn't sure, but now, like, nobody like willing to trade with them. I still stand by just like looking at the history of it. Goaltenders don't fetch
Yep.
trade returns like we think they do. I think a lot of them are more valuable to you than they are in a trade as like an asset moving forward. Um, and you'd be hard pressed to find a trade that has a goaltender in it that, uh, it like significantly alters the franchise in any kind of way. And the Flyers have kind of been, and I still have that because I'm at that age where like I remember very, very vividly how things played out the seasons before the Flyers decided to trade Bob for pennies on the dollar, and how that all went down.
Totally
And
different situation,
different
though.
situation for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And yeah, totally different situation. But just knowing that they had moved him and then going on to see the player that he became,
yep.
it was, I want them to hopefully like that they had learned their lesson from that,
All right.
and that they don't make the same mistake twice. But the one thing about the Flyers organization right now, with all the things that you can criticize them for, and there's plenty, that when it comes to prospects and like a strength of their system is how many goalies they have in the
Yep.
system. So they probably could make a Carter Hart trade, but it's just I don't know how many real futures you're getting back in that deal. I would prefer to keep him and walk him up the free agency, or his restricted free agent year. I don't remember if he's coming up on UFA or not.
I think it's one more year than RFA, I believe.
Yeah, I would probably, like, just in my own view of it, I think I'd walk a player like that up to it, see where you are at that point,
Yep.
and then if you're in a position where you've arrived to your destination earlier than you had hoped, or that you had planned rather, um, then maybe you can talk yourself into giving him the long term deal, knowing that he's going to be a part of the future and you're going to get his prime years. Um, I think I would think about that because I think sometimes, especially when we look at where the Flyers are now and all the rumors that are out there, um, you do have to, even if you're not expected to be very good, you still have to like dress a roster, like and play it, like you have to have a
Yeah,
team.
yeah, and I think and something that Tortorella's talked on, and even the newer guys like Jonesy and Briere have kind of talked on it. Like culture is very important, and when you build a culture to lose on purpose, it can be very dangerous long term.
Yeah,
So like look at the Blackhawks. Yeah, they got Connor Bedard. How long is it going to take them to compete? I don't know they made a trade for Taylor Hall today, but like how long is it going to take them to be competitive? It might be 4 or 5 years.
yeah, yeah, and that I mean that team was just atrocious
They
last year.
gutted them like
Yeah,
completely.
and it's it's unfair, to a young player as gifted as they are
Yeah.
to have them come in and just be this like, okay, you're going to be our magic elixir here. You're going to fix everything. For as brilliant as you may be as a young, outstanding player, it's not a fair thing to do to put them in a position like that where they're kind of expected to just kind of reverse the fortunes of the franchise. It
Yep.
takes time.
Look how long it took Edmonton with McDavid. Like they still really haven't gotten over the hump. Like I know they're
Yeah,
competitive and they're a contender because they have McDavid and Draisaitl, but they I mean it takes a while. I mean once you put the culture of losing, I mean Buffalo's finally just starting to like be competitive
yeah,
when they try to tank for McDavid and got Eichel. Like it just the build it down and trying to lose on purpose does not work long term. And I think the Flyers understand that. They're trying to rebuild while having a competitive team that's going to fight every night and build a culture that is not okay with losing.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because like you look at like someone like Briere and all the things that he has said. It's kind of like just in my own personal philosophy of like how to build a roster with a good culture and an environment where losing isn't acceptable. Um, it's like I don't know that I would be if someone called me tomorrow and made me a general manager of a team. I don't know that I would be committed to any one direction in terms of like, oh hey, we're tanking or oh
Yeah,
hey, we're going for it. If whether you're contending or not, and a player who's a good player that fits into what you're looking for. He's 24 years old and he comes to you on a good price. You have to consider that,
yeah,
no matter no matter where you may be or whatever verbiage you're using to describe your predicament. The talent, like it's hard to get, it's hard to just pass on the talent.
yeah.
Um, I'd seen a rumor somewhere floating around on Twitter that the Flyers were one of the teams that had made a call on Pierre Luc Dubois.
Really, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, and it's like I have no idea if that has any legs or not. Um,
That's
but
interesting. I don't
if
know how I feel about Pierre Luc Dubois.
I don't know how I feel about him either,
Yeah.
and he seemed to have issues with Tortorella before. If when he coached him in Columbus.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's the weird thing is like he's been on two franchises now and he's wanted to leave both, but like it's Columbus and Winnipeg, so I kind of get it.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that.
I think the belief with him too is like he's like angling to get to Montreal
Yep,
is
from
like where he
there.
wants to be,
Yeah,
uh, and they like in up there in Habs country, like it's very like um they French Canadian kid that grew up in the area, they love that
oh,
stuff.
I'm
Like
sure they do. They'll eat that up all day.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they love that stuff. So um and he it's like he's young and with all those things that we hear about him that aren't good things, but he's still like a 60-point player with potential for growth there. But there is a little bit, I think, of an issue of how committed is he. I don't know him personally, so I don't know. But it just based on what what you've seen from him. I mean, did you ever see that clip of him in Columbus
Columbus, it was brutal.
taking
Well,
that shift
oh
that
my god, so bad.
that
Like that
Sunday
that's called
stroll
the
through the
shift
park?
for like the total opposite reason as we call like the Richards and Drew shifts. It's like
Yeah,
this shift, but for all the wrong reasons.
yeah,
He looks so uninterested, and no, you can't have that on your team. Like we talk about
yeah,
culture, that's the things you have to get rid of.
yeah. Like if you got like I guess it's all right if on your like you're dealing with like a child
Yeah,
on like the mites team and he's like throwing a fit.
yeah. I don't feel like being here tonight.
Yeah, but
I
when
want
you're
to play video games. I'm it's an 8-year-old. I want to go home. I don't want to
yeah,
do this anymore.
the boys are on Fortnite and I'm
Yeah,
out here.
exactly.
But yeah, like I to have that and like that can't happen in a
No,
pro game,
no,
you know. And it's funny because of how egregious it was. Like
so bad. He didn't even make an effort to like make it look like he cared.
yeah, he didn't
Nothing at
hide it.
all.
He
No.
didn't hide it or anything. So that stuff can't happen. But to go back to my original point, I had heard like I had seen that floated out there that maybe they had made a call or something like that, that the Flyers had made a call, and it's like to me, I know people look at that and they'll be like, why are the Flyers looking at something like that? They're in a rebuild, but it's like he's like in his mid 20s and he's been a 60-point player, and maybe there's room for growth there. I would put in a call too. I think like just to check on the status of the player, to see if that's something that could work for us. It's there's no one way to build a team, and now that the Flyers seem like they have this like vision and this plan in place that everybody throughout from top to bottom seems on board with. Uh, it's encouraging because that it just hasn't been like that for them lately.
Yeah.
So
For sure, and we can move to the draft. But before I do that, I got to tell everybody about our sponsor. If you haven't heard already, it's Smooth Sack Summer. When you're playing in the sun, make sure you're skate from pubes to bum. That is right. This is the summer to keep your balls cool while looking hot with Manscaped. The leaders in below the waist grooming are making sure we all have a ball this summer by giving our pants partners everything they need to stay fresh. Dive headfirst into Smooth Sack Summer by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with our code FIREDUP. Again, that's 20% off with the code FIREDUP at manscaped.com. It's Smooth Sack Summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind. A lot of good stuff at Manscaped. So the draft, who do you think goes number one? No, I'm kidding. It's obviously Connor Bedard going to Chicago. And I feel like there's a small chance things could get interesting at number two. But by all accounts, it's Adam Fantilli, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some stuff like maybe the Mitch Call factor comes in and maybe they go number two with Mitch Call. I don't see it happening. I think they're close enough in talent that they'd rather just take the lesser of the risks there.
Yeah, and it's going to be something like the Michkov thing on Wednesday is going to be fascinating.
Yep.
It's just like the talent level is so great there, the potential is so great there, and it's really not about this kid at all. It's all about the things surrounding the Russian-Ukraine conflict and
His
military service, contracts in the KHL, things like that. All these other things that are, they don't have anything to do with hockey, but like when you look at just from like a pure offensive wizardry standpoint, like the only player that can match this kid is Bedard in terms of like offensive ability. It's a big risk without a doubt. It's definitely a risk. I don't think it's enough of a risk for me if it were my call.
At two, you're talking about.
At two, yeah. I mean, like it's not that much of a. It's not that much, especially for a team like the Ducks. I think like they're probably not going anywhere anytime soon. They have a nice young nucleus of players there.
Yep.
And I think Fantilli, who's likely going to be the second overall pick, he's going to fit in really nicely there. Trevor Zegras, Jamie Drysdale, Mason McTavish.
You really have. I mean, McTavish and Fantilli can kind of be your 1-2 up the middle, and I think that allows you to move Zegers over to wing. Because I really don't think Zegers is an NHL center. I don't.
Yeah.
I think he's perfectly suited on the wing, and I think that gives him an opportunity to move him over to the wing.
Yeah, and it probably maximizes his greatest assets, right? Is his offensive ability, his goal scoring ability, he do all that creative stuff that he likes to try to do.
Yep.
Um, and so I really like, I think if I were the Ducks, Fantilli would be my pick if I were in their shoes. The the Michkov thing is going to be something that all these teams 2 through 10 are going to weigh. And someone's going to take the big leap, and if it works out, we'll probably look back on it and be like, man, I can't believe they did that. And but it happens. I think all years and years ago, it happened with Yamir Yager. Like,
Yep.
there was that situation there where teams weren't sure, is he coming over, when's he coming over, and he ended up in Pittsburgh, part of great Cup teams with Mario and all that. So it can change the fortunes of your franchise pretty significantly. But Fantilli's there's too much to like about that kid.
Yeah. And you talk about the risk factor with Michkov, and again, after the first pick, we're going to be watching every team. Is this the team that takes the risk? Is this the team that takes the risk? And after hearing the pre-draft press conference from Danny Briere and Brent Flahr, it sounds like there's a legitimate chance the Flyers take Matvei Michkov, which I didn't think was a possibility at all until I heard that press conference.
Yeah, and same. I felt the same way, and it's like, because I had been, for anybody listening that follows me on Twitter or sees any of my stuff, like I'm all on the Michkov train.
Yeah.
I'm all ready to go with this. I think for the Flyers, I'd have the risk appetite to draft him and let the other things play out. There are rumors out there though that Arizona may be looking to move back to move back in the draft for a team that may want to take Michkov.
What's the price to move from 7 to 6? Like, go up one spot. What does that cost you?
Yeah, and it's like how you're swapping picks there.
Yeah.
And I know Washington has been one of the other teams. They have
the fit makes so much sense for Washington. I can understand them wanting to do it. Like, it makes too much sense with the Ovechkin factor, and they've had a really long history with Russians. It makes so much sense in Washington.
Yeah.
But hopefully the Flyers beat them to the punch.
Yeah, and it would be great if they could.
Yeah.
I would take that risk. I don't know that I would be trading, 22 and 7 to move up one spot to take him.
One spot's tough. It's
at that, because it's like the value's off the charts if he falls to 7, and you have the opportunity to take him, and you're like, versus the talent level versus where you're picking to get a player like that, and it's like, wow, like you can't beat it.
So to talk about something we talked about a little earlier, when it comes to Kevin Hayes, say he gets traded to St. Louis, just Kevin Hayes. What does that return fetch you? I'll take you somewhere after I ask this question. What does that get you? A Kevin Hayes trade?
I would be thinking mid-round pick. I can't imagine that someone's, and it's not a knock on Kevin at all. Like, he's come here and he's done what he's exactly the same player I think he was advertised to be when they signed him. It's just that the Flyers are in a completely different place than they were when they brought him in. And it's like, it's not a knock on the player at all. Kevin Hayes is an objectively good player. That would probably be a nice piece for a team. Maybe not at $7 million, but $4 million, it's pretty good value if the Flyers are retaining salary there.
Especially with, we didn't talk about it all yet, the free agent class is terrible this year.
Yeah.
So that could boost his value, because a team wanting a second or third line center, well, there's really none in free agency. Now I gotta, the price for Kevin Hayes might go up a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe you're able to get your hands on a mid-round pick or so, and I think the Flyers would just take the cap relief and run there.
So I saw earlier, and I don't know how true it is, that the ask is probably a second round pick.
Yeah.
Now, say you trade Hayes to the St. Louis Blues for a second round pick. Would you trade 7 and that second round pick to move up one spot?
Yeah, I think I would if I could keep the first,
Yeah,
the additional, the
yeah, because
22nd.
because at that point you got to ask yourself, would I trade number 7 and Kevin Hayes for 6 overall? And yeah,
Right.
do it in a
Yeah.
heartbeat.
Yeah. 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 No, it makes sense. And Arizona's smart to do that. Like, to kind of like, hey, we're willing to, move back a spot if someone really likes Michkov. We don't know if we're going there. Like, it's smart. It's smart to do that, I think. But, for anybody trying to move up into the top 5, like, I know, like, that's always something we discuss every summer in the draft, like,
Yeah.
like, it's never, the price is too great. And the team that's sitting in the top 5, it never really makes sense for them to do that.
Yeah, I forget the actual year, but I think the last time a top 10 pick's been traded has been like 06 or something like that.
Wow.
Like, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen often where a top 10 pick gets traded.
Yeah. Yeah. It's rare,
Yeah.
and it's like, because, and especially in a draft like this where the top 15 is so strong.
Yep.
It's, you're not, if you're sitting just outside the top 5, you're not getting in the top 5. You're not, if you're picking, 9th, 10 and 11, something like that,
Yep.
you're not getting 4, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, right.
without, like, giving up an arm and a leg to get into that spot. So that's probably not going to happen. But yeah, so I think it's, the Michkov thing is going to be fascinating. That's going to be really interesting to watch. And there's a couple teams before the Flyers at 7. Like, for some reason, I think the Sharks make a lot of sense for Michkov. Like, I've kind of thought that
Yeah.
that might be a team that would be willing to absorb that kind of risk. And, so that'll be interesting. But whether they take him, whether Michkov goes earlier or not, is going to be really interesting. On the flip side of that conversation is that there's going to be other great players there.
That was
that
going
are
to be my next question. If Matvey
Yeah.
Michkov does go before 7 and the Flyers are picking at 7 and he's not on the board, he's not available, who's your guy?
I think right now it would be Zach Benson for sure.
Okay.
I think it would be Benson. I like, I just, there's a lot of, like, Ryan Leonard's names out there a ton. A lot of teams seem to really like him. He plays a real hard game. It kind of sounds like teams are looking at what the Florida Panthers were able to do with Matthew Tkachuk, and people are like, hey, we need a guy like that. And and I haven't seen Leonard play a whole bunch. I've seen him play a couple summertime tournaments on
Right. Yep.
So I haven't seen him play a whole lot. The people that have really love his game. I wouldn't be upset with the pick at 7. I just don't know a whole lot about him. I really like Benson's probably my lead choice there, but I really do like DeBoer Dvorsky, another centerman from Slovakia. I think he's a really smart, mature player. And then David Reinbacher, who, I don't know if you remember, but last year we did this draft show, and we had talked about the Flyers were picking 5th overall, and I was really, really on David Urasek was my guy. And he ended up in Columbus. Flyers ended up going with Cutter Gauthier, and that worked out fine. But it's, just the profile, the big, smooth skating, right shot defenseman. They're hard to find, and
Yep.
I think you have to consider that too at 7 if you're the Flyers, because I think he'll be there. I think
Yeah,
Reinbacher
I
will be
think he
there.
will be, and if he doesn't, somebody great has dropped to you.
Yeah. So they'll have options.
Yeah, no, totally. And he's probably, when you look at the crop of like forwards in this draft, he's probably not the sexy name compared to those guys. But one of Keith Jones's things when he first got hired by the Flyers is he talked about how important he thinks it is to build from the defense out.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't shock me at all if they go David Reinbacher, not in the slightest.
Yeah. And it that's kind of like an old school, like, hockey philosophy, but I think it works. I
Yep.
think it works. They're tried and true like hockeyisms for a reason. They work.
Yep.
Um, and I look at an organization like Nashville. You know, Nashville's been building from their net out for that. They've been a defenseman factory for
They
years. Like,
breed defensemen like crazy. It's
yeah,
every year there's just another great defenseman out of
just
Nashville.
great players, got like great defensemen. They know how to evaluate them, man. And
Yep.
it's like, um, and I think it's a smart strategy because the prices you pay to get them, it's just absolute premium. Whether they make it to UFA like an Alex Petrangelo, and you have to give them that huge contract, or you try to make a trade for one and you pay through the nose in terms of price. Uh, Especially if they can play in the top four and they're right-handed, they always seem to covet like team seem to covet them. And I think if you can develop that part of your prospect pool with higher end guys with top four potential, it just makes it easier for you to identify the guys that you want to keep that are a part of your solution, and then flip the guys that aren't, and for something that you need. And I think that could be easier to do it that way.
Yeah.
So Ryan Backer is definitely a good fit there, and it's really one I don't want to jinx it, but the Flyers at 7 are in a pretty sweet spot. I feel like
There's options.
there's options.
There's definitely options. Even a guy, I know he's probably projected to go maybe a little lower, 10, 11, 12, but like Oliver Moore would even be a good fit at 7.
Yeah,
And
he can
and the
fly.
Flyer, and he can, and like the Flyers aren't like they're. I don't think they have any sort of one need. Like they kind of just pick whoever you think is the best player available. I think you
Yeah,
pick that guy.
yeah, and it's interesting that way too, because usually teams in the top 10, they have multiple needs, they have multiple
Yep.
holes to fill.
True.
So it's like, and we talk about that. It always varies, right? Like everybody's best player available will vary on how they evaluate those players. But yeah, it's the Flyers have all these options here, and it's like, as long as they don't go like way off the board, you know,
Yeah. Right.
they don't go like off the res here with this pick or
Like
something.
yeah, like Jay O'Brien. Want them picking a Jay O'Brien?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
You don't want that to happen,
No.
but
No.
uh, they're critical picks. You saw like the fallout just with through no fault of their own, really, like with the Nolan Patrick situation and him getting hurt like he did and all that. It's like eh, it's hard to recover from when
It
you miss
is.
on those picks that high. And
Especially
then
when sorry to cut you off, especially when like that pick was supposed to fall in your lap. Like they jumped up from what 13
yeah,
to draft Nolan Patrick, and then
yeah,
he had an okay first 2 or 3 years, and then the injury just caught up to him, and it didn't work out. It
and
sucks.
anything that played out after that, Cal McCarr, Miro Heiskanen,
Yep.
Elias Pettersson, those guys, all outstanding players. But if you go back and if you go back there, I was one of those people. It was the Nico Nolan draft. It
Yep.
was Heischer and Patrick at the top of that draft, and I was one of those people that like I know Heischer was he was shooting up the draft boards at the
I
time.
was gonna say like maybe a month or 2 months out is kind of when it became the Heischer Patrick draft, because like the
Yeah.
entire NHL season it was dubbed the Nolan Patrick draft. Like
Mhm.
it was Nolan Patrick and everybody else, and then
Yeah.
Heischer shot up. I think Patrick dealt with it. Was it the year he dealt with the injury? I think it was.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then it just didn't work out, which it's
Yeah.
so frustrating.
Yeah.
Only the
And
Flyers, right?
yeah, really. And it just, man, that's just it's hard to recover from that. And early returns on Cutter Gauthier look good for them. He was a
Big
top 5
Cutter
pick
fan.
last
Yep.
year. Yep, and I think he absolutely killed the World Championship tournament earlier this summer. He was a monster in that tournament. It was so fun to
I
watch.
think he led the tournament in goals, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
He was either leading or he tied for
Yeah.
it. But he had a great tournament and summertime tournament and all that, and I understand that, but it was against professionals, and for a kid that's going back to college next year, that was really very, very promising, and I think it got a lot of people justifiably excited about him. And he's probably not that far away. He could probably play in the pros next year or at the end of this year.
Yeah, I think there's a chance we'll see him at the end of the college season.
Yeah, so you hit on those picks, and then it'll accelerate your process. But you have to hit on them, and the Flyers will have a lot of options on Wednesday night.
Totally. So they also pick at 20. What is it? 22. Yeah, 22. Is there anybody keeping your eye on at 22?
Yeah, I mean, there's been players like Danny Butt, I think he'll be floating around there. He's an interesting prospect. There's one more player that I was really Riley Height. Is that how you say his name? I think he's a centerman. His name's out there. It was funny because a lot of my preparation this year, I've been looking at this stuff for a while now, and it was all top 10, top 15 guys because the Flyers they didn't have the second
right
there. And then they got the second, and I was like, oh man, they're in the back end of the draft. I got to start looking at this stuff.
Right.
So those are the early looks I've gotten at guys, but there should be other defensemen there as well. I think floating around that spot around 22.
I like Quentin Musty.
Quentin Musty's another one.
Yep. Yeah, winger, big body, playmaker.
Yeah,
he seems like a prick to kind of play against.
Yeah.
I like that name around 22.
Yeah, he's interesting. There's a little bit of like if you're looking for that, like if the Flyers want like that power wing element, he could be a good fit that way for them. Big skill guy, and not afraid to like get in there and work a little bit.
Yeah.
So he's another interesting name. Musty. He's another interesting player out there for sure.
There's also another Gauthier in the draft. That could be fun.
Yeah, I did see that.
Not related. I can't find any sort of relation. But I thought that was funny.
Yeah. Yep.
Could go that route. All right. So before we get out here, anything else you wanna cover before we leave here?
I don't think there's anything else for me. I just get ready for this Wednesday show, our live NHL Draft show.
Yep. We're just about to bring that up. So I'm handing you the keys. your time to shine. We'll be doing the live show Wednesday night around start time of the draft, 7 p.m. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I listen with the kids. At 7 p.m. such a weird start time. They should have done it at 8.
Yeah.
To make my life easier. So I'll hop on when I can.
Cool.
But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll be doing all live breakdowns. What's his name's going to join us? Don Conaway's going to join us from Drunk on Broad. He's going to be on. And we'll kind of do all live reactions to these picks. There's going to be, I can just imagine, just Michkov falling. We're doing the show, and Michkov's falling. Yeah. Flyers trade with Phoenix.
Well, it was funny when
I'm going to be going crazy.
When I don't know if you noticed, when we were a part of the Belly Up Sports, they had a show on their network that it was just like a fantasy football type show.
Mm-hmm.
So they invited me, Don, and Dom on. They were doing like a full I think first 2 rounds live of the NFL draft.
Mm-hmm.
They invited us on. It kind of took a bunch of personalities and to put them throughout the first round. So we had like a 5-pick window because we were trying to. I think we had picks like 16, 17, 18, and 19 or something like that. We were going to be on because I specifically picked that time frame because the Eagles, I think, were coming up with a pick.
Yeah,
we were on that show when they announced that they traded for AJ Brown, and our reactions were crazy.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it was nuts. So I fully expect something like that to happen on Wednesday.
Yeah, that would be great. The content would be great.
Yeah, it was breaking news. We heard it, and we were like, no, you're kidding. That really happened. Really. Our reactions were nuts. So I definitely expect something like that to happen. But all right, we're going to get out of here. Mark, I appreciate you joining me tonight. I know it was last minute notice. And again, Wednesday, 7 p.m., we'll be live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Because I'm tired of Twitter. I'm tired of going live on Twitter. I can't see any comments. It's a mess. So what's the point? We'll take it to Twitch. So yeah, add Fired Up Sports too on those platforms. So we're gonna get out of here, and we will see everybody Wednesday, and then the regular show next Monday. See you then.